5th of July 1943, Kursk salient, central USSR. At 04:30 hours, German artillery opened along a 300-kilometer front, logged by Soviet observation posts as continuous thunder. Staff estimates from Army Group Center predicted breakthrough within 72 hours. Intelligence summaries from OKH suggested Soviet reserves were exhausted. Reality documented otherwise. Soviet engineering records confirm 8 defensive belts constructed between April and June, each kilometer receiving 2,400 mines. Decrypted signals intercepted by British intelligence on 24th April had already revealed German logistical delays. By evening of the first day, Model's 9th Army advanced 5 kilometers at a cost of 86 tanks, losses exceeding projections by 230%. The offensive that was meant to restore initiative became the largest armoured engagement ever recorded. In the archived reports, the pattern emerges clearly. Attrition began before contact. The ledgers tell what the maps could not, that Kursk marked the moment industrial capacity replaced tactical brilliance as the war's deciding factor. Spring rain fell across Zossen on 13th March 1943 when Führer Directive No. 6 arrived at OKH headquarters. The order was precise: destroy Soviet forces concentrated at the Kursk salient and restore German initiative in the east. Staff officers at Abteilung Fremde Heere Ost compiled intelligence summaries suggesting Soviet reserves had been exhausted at Stalingrad. The assessment proved fatally optimistic. Operational planning divided responsibility between 2 army groups. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein's Army Group South would attack northward from Belgorod. Field Marshal Günther von Kluge's Army Group Center, with Model's 9th Army as spearhead, would strike southward from Orel. The salient would be pinched closed, trapping Soviet forces in a classic Kesselschlacht, cauldron battle. Albert Speer's Armaments Ministry reported production figures that seemed encouraging. By June, 270 new Panther AUSFD tanks would be ready for deployment, alongside 146 Tiger Riot heavy tanks and 90 Ferdinand tank destroyers. Factory schedules showed 24-hour shifts at assembly plants in Kassel and Schweinfurt, yet maintenance logs told a different story. 20% of the Panthers required repairs before reaching the front. Transmission failures appeared during factory trials, oil seals leaked, final drive units cracked under test loads. Oberst Hans-Ulrich Rudel, later reviewing the reports, noted in his diary, "We are deploying prototypes as if they were proven systems." Across the front line, Soviet intelligence was reading German preparations with uncomfortable clarity. On 24th of April, Bletchley Park decrypted Enigma traffic revealing postponements and tank shortages. The intelligence reached Moscow within 36 hours. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, reviewing the intercepts at Stavka headquarters, ordered immediate defensive preparations. The Red Army would not retreat. It would prepare a trap measured in depth, not width. Weather records for late April note heavy spring rains across the Ukrainian steppe. Roads turned to mud. German supply columns slowed. Each week of delay gave Soviet engineers more time to fortify. By early May, reconnaissance flights photographed the first defensive trenches. Staff officers dismissed them as standard field works. They were not. Between April and June 1943, over 300,000 Soviet civilians were mobilized for defensive construction across the Kursk sector. Engineering battalions documented the work in daily reports, filed with Central Front headquarters. Each defensive belt stretched the width of the salient, 300 kilometers from north to south. Each belt contained interconnected trenches, anti-tank ditches, artillery positions, and minefields arranged in calculated patterns. Central Front Commander Konstantin Rokossovsky ordered precise mine density, 2,400 mines per kilometer of front. Voronezh Front Commander Nikolai Vatutin matched the standard. Soviet mine production records from Tula and Gorky show output rising to 40,000 units per week through May and June. Senior Sergeant Yelena Smirnova of the 3rd Defensive Battalion kept a diary throughout the construction period. Her unit laid mines south of Ponary. On 15th of May she wrote, "We built through thunder. Each strike of lightning sounded like tomorrow's bombardment. The earth accepted metal as if it knew what was coming." Weather diaries confirm her account. Spring storms delayed final mine laying until 27 June. Mud slowed transport. Wooden stakes for marking fields rotted and required replacement. Engineers worked in shifts, 12 hours on, 6 hours rest. Rations consisted of black bread, kasha, and occasionally salted fish. By mid-June, the defensive system extended 60 kilometers in depth behind the front line. Artillery positions numbered in the thousands. Anti-tank guns, primarily 76.2 mm ZS-3 and 45 mm M1942 models, covered every approach route identified by reconnaissance. Ammunition stockpiles exceeded 3 million rounds. Fuel depots held reserves for 2 months of sustained operations. Soviet doctrine called the system, quote, defense in depth. Successive belts designed to slow, channel, and destroy attacking armor through cumulative attrition rather than single breakthrough points. For military analysts reviewing the plans decades later, the design represented the most extensive fortification effort since Verdun in 1916. German aerial reconnaissance detected the anomaly by late June. Photographs showed trench networks far exceeding normal defensive preparations. Luftwaffe analysts estimated construction timelines and concluded the Soviets had begun work in early April, before German offensive plans were finalized. The implication was clear but uncomfortable. Soviet intelligence had foreknowledge. Orders from Berlin forbade delay despite the revelations. Hitler insisted on attacking before Soviet reserves could strengthen further. At OKH headquarters, staff officers updated loss projections upward, but maintained operational timelines. The offensive would proceed as scheduled. By early July 1943, German armoured strength concentrated for Operation Citadel reached documented totals: 2,928 tanks and assault guns. The inventory represented the largest mechanized force Germany had assembled since the opening of Barbarossa in 1941. The breakdown appeared impressive on paper. Army Group South deployed 780 tanks, including the new Panthers and Tigers. Army Group Center fielded slightly fewer, relying more heavily on proven Panzer III and IV models, upgraded with additional armor and improved main guns. 90 Ferdinand tank destroyers, mounting 80 P-meter guns in fixed casemates, provided long-range anti-tank capability. Fuel logistics demanded meticulous planning. Operational estimates required 90,000 tons of fuel for the offensive's first phase. Deliveries arrived from Ploiești refineries through rail hubs at Kharkov and Orel. Transport officers logged each shipment against consumption projections. Margins remained thin. Colonel Gerhard Engert, OKH logistics coordinator, wrote on 3rd of July, "Every delay costs not only fuel, but faith. We operate on schedules that permit no error. Yet operational readiness reports revealed problems masked by headline totals. 16% of armoured vehicles failed to reach assembly areas. Mechanical breakdowns ranged from thrown tracks to engine failures to transmission collapses. Recovery crews worked around the clock pulling disabled vehicles from roadways. spare parts inventories depleted before combat commenced. The Panther deployment proved particularly troubled. Factory representatives accompanied the tanks to the front, providing on-site repairs and adjustments. Crews received abbreviated training, insufficient for the complex new systems. Engine fires occurred during road marches. Final drive failures immobilized tanks during tactical movements. Maintenance logs from 3 Panzer Corps recorded 23 Panthers disabled by mechanical failure before 5th of July. For historians examining the documents decades later, the pre-battle attrition signaled a deeper issue. German industrial capacity had reached its operational ceiling. Production emphasis on advanced systems reduced overall reliability. Complexity bred fragility. The tactical advantages of heavier armor and more powerful guns came at the cost of mechanical durability. At 03 ZAG on 5th of July, final orders transmitted across communication networks. Feuerfrei, commence Citadel. Radio operators logged acknowledgements from divisional headquarters. Artillery crews loaded shells. Tank commanders started engines. In the pre-dawn darkness, exhaust smoke drifted across assembly areas. Weather reports noted clear skies, 22 degrees Celsius, visibility 12 kilometers. The machines began moving forward. Chapter 3, 403 words. Model's 9th Army opened fire at 0430 on 5th July 1943. Soviet intercept units at Poniri recorded the shelling intensity as unbroken thunder lasting 40 minutes. Artillery preparation targeted known defensive positions, command posts and observation points. Luftwaffe bombers struck supply dumps and road junctions. By 0510, lead German assault units crossed the start line. Soviet forward observers called in counter-battery fire within minutes. Artillery exchanges escalated. Smoke obscured visibility across the northern sector. Tank formations advanced through the haze, navigating by compass bearing and pre-marked maps. The first minefields appeared at Kursk. Combat engineers from 9th Army's pioneer battalions attempted to clear lanes under fire. Soviet infantry positions along the first offensive belt engaged with rifles, machine guns, and anti-tank rifles. PaK-40 anti-tank guns opened fire at ranges exceeding 800 meters. Tigers and Panthers absorbed hits that disabled lighter vehicles. By noon, German spearheads had penetrated 5 kilometers into Soviet defenses. Operational reports logged the advance as meeting expectations. Loss reports told a different story. Soviet Engineer Report number 12 filed that evening documented 86 German tanks destroyed or disabled, primarily by mines. German maintenance units confirmed similar figures. Major General Ivan Panfilov's rifle division manned the first defensive line near Poniri. Private Nikolai Lebedev served with the division's anti-tank battery. His letter home, written 3 days later and preserved in family archives, described the initial assault. We could not see them clearly through the smoke, but the earth beneath us kept shaking. The lieutenant said to fire at engine noise. We did. Metal screamed louder than orders. Weather conditions remained clear through the afternoon. 22 degrees, scattered smoke haze reducing visibility to 4 kilometers by 15 so. Tank battles continued through evening. Luftwaffe close support missions dropped to lower altitudes as smoke thickened. Soviet Yak-9 fighters engaged German bombers over the battlefield. Air combat added to the confusion below. By 22:00, Model ordered a tactical pause. Forward units consolidated positions. Recovery crews moved disabled vehicles the rearward. Medical stations processed casualties. Staff officers compiled loss reports for transmission to Army Group Center headquarters. For German planners, the pause represented the first significant operational hesitation on the Eastern Front since 1941. Projected breakthrough timelines had already slipped. Attrition rates exceeded pre-battle estimates by more than 200%. The Northern Axis had stalled not from Soviet counterattack, but from cumulative defensive friction. The maps at headquarters still showed forward progress. The ledgers revealed something else. Von Manstein's 4th Panzer Army struck northward from Belgorod on 5 July with greater initial success. TOW SS Panzer Corps led the assault, 3 elite divisions equipped with the newest tanks and commanded by experienced officers who had fought across the Eastern Front since 1941. Soviet aerial reconnaissance logged 320 tank silhouettes by 10 August on 6 July. Voronezh Front headquarters received reports throughout the morning detailing German progress. Defensive positions along the First Belt engaged as designed, slowing but not stopping the advance. Soviet doctrine called for measured withdrawal to successive defensive lines, forcing attackers to expend strength crossing each belt. Luftwaffe support proved more effective in the south than on the northern axis. Weather remained clear. Luftflotte 4 flew 1,600, 3 sorties on 6 July, Ju-87 Stukas, H-129 tank busters, and FW-190 fighter bombers attacking Soviet positions, supply routes, and reserve concentrations. Soviet Second Air Army countered with 1,700 sorties, Il-2 Sturmovix striking German armour, Yak-9s and La-5s engaging Luftwaffe formations. Lieutenant Alexei Rodimtsev served as radio operator with 5th Guards Army defending south of Aboyan. His after-action notes, filed with unit records, described the intensity. Smell of burning lubricant grew stronger than smoke. We heard them before seeing them, engine roar, track clatter, shell impacts. Radio traffic became constant, coordinates, requests, casualty reports. By afternoon my ears rang, even when transmissions paused. The 3 SS divisions, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, Das Reich, and Totenkopf, pushed forward through 6 and 7th July. Combined, they advanced approximately 25 kilometers in 2 days. Soviet defenders withdrew to prepared positions. Artillery fire intensified. Minefields slowed German progress. Anti-tank guns engaged from hull-down positions. Tank battles occurred at ranges from 200 to 1,200 meters. German operational reports logged 204 armoured vehicles lost or disabled by evening of 7th July. Fuel consumption exceeded projections. Ammunition expenditure outpaced resupply. Each kilometre gained required approximately 100,000 litres of fuel and 40 tanks disabled or destroyed. For staff officers monitoring the offensive from Army Group South headquarters, the statistics revealed an uncomfortable truth. Tactical success was consuming operational capacity. Citadel had become an equation of consumption rather than manoeuvre. Breakthroughs existed on tactical maps but disappeared into logistics tables. The offensive continued, but its mathematical foundation was collapsing kilometre by kilometre. Soviet reserves remained uncommitted. Stavka headquarters monitored German progress and calculated remaining strength. The trap was closing not through counterattack, but through patient attrition, letting German momentum exhaust itself against prepared defences before committing mobile reserves for counter-offensive operations. The decisive moment approached. Chapter 5, 455 words. The air war over Kursk reached peak intensity during 7 to 8 July. Luftflotte 4 recorded 1,868 sorties on 7th July alone. Soviet Second Air Army countered with 2,300. The sky above the battlefield became a 3-dimensional combat zone stretching from ground level to 6,000 meters altitude. German aircraft types reflected tactical priorities. Ju-87D Stukas, carrying 500-kilogram bombs, Hs E-29B2 tank busters mounting 30mm cannon, Fw-109 TA-5 fighter bombers equipped for ground attack. Luftwaffe doctrine emphasized close air support coordinated with advancing armor. Radio communications linked air and ground units in real-time targeting. Soviet aviation responded with mass formations. Il-2 Sturmovik ground attack aircraft. Armored cockpits protecting crews, wing-mounted rockets, and 23mm cannon engaging German tanks, flew in groups of 12 to 16. Fighter escorts provided by Yak-9 and La-5 units engaged German fighters before they could intercept the Sturmoviks. Soviet doctrine accepted higher losses in exchange for sustained pressure on German ground forces. Feldwebel Karl-Heinz Lamm flew Ju-87D operations with Stuka Geschwader II throughout the battle. His logbook, preserved at the Bundesarchiv, contains entries for 7th of July. Third sortie, target, Soviet armor concentration grid 4472. Weather clear, dust turbulence below 500 meters. Accuracy reduced. We hit the smoke, not the tanks. Flak intense. Returned with holes in tail section. Weather conditions affected operations significantly. Surface temperatures reached 28 degrees Celsius. Dry winds lifted dust from cratered ground. Visibility at low altitude dropped to 2 kilometers in some sectors. Artillery smoke compounded the problem. Pilots reported difficulty acquiring targets through the haze. Soviet radar stations near Kursk, British supplied equipment operated by trained crews, tracked German formations and directed interceptors with increasing effectiveness. Interception rates rose from 19% in early July to 46% by 9th July. For aviation historians, the statistics marked a technological turning point, radar-directed air defense becoming operationally decisive. Both sides suffered heavy losses. Luftflotte 4 recorded 112 aircraft destroyed or damaged between 5 to 9th July. Soviet aviation losses exceeded 300, higher in absolute numbers but lower as percentage of available strength. German fuel reserves dwindled faster than anticipated. By 9th of July, Luftflotte 4's fuel inventory had dropped to 38% of operational requirements. Ground crews worked continuously, rearming, refueling, repairs, all conducted under time pressure with insufficient spare parts. Mechanics slept beside aircraft. Pilots flew 3 to 4 sorties daily. Fatigue affected both sides equally. In the archived records, the air battle over Kursk appears as industrial attrition translated into aerial combat. Whoever could sustain losses longest would control the sky. The battlefield required air superiority. Neither side achieved it. Instead, both exhausted themselves trying. Chapter 6, 464 words. Rain arrived on 9th of July, transforming the battlefield. Soviet weather logs recorded steady precipitation beginning at 02 Sugang and continuing through the day. Temperatures dropped to 16 degrees Celsius. Visibility fell to 1 kilometer. The steppe turned to mud. Tank mobility collapsed. German operational reports noted average speeds dropping from 20 kilometers per hour to 6. Tracks through mud. Engines overheated from strain. Infantry could not keep pace with armor. Supply trucks bogged down on secondary roads. The offensive's tempo, already slowing from cumulative losses, ground nearly to halt. Soviet 1st Tank Army launched counterattacks near Yakovlevo on 9th of July. The mud affected both sides, but Soviet units operated from prepared positions with shorter supply lines. German maintenance units recorded 600 vehicles disabled by evening, 60% from mechanical failures, rather than combat damage. Recovery became impossible in many sectors. Disabled tanks remained in place, marking the offensive's high water line. Unteroffizier Hans Mertens served with a maintenance company attached to the 3rd Panzer Corps. His report, filed with unit records, described repair operations under fire. Metal screamed more than men. We worked in mud past our knees. Artillery fell throughout the afternoon. Track pins sheared. Transmissions locked. We could fix mechanical problems if given time. Time was what we lacked. Each tank we returned to service represented someone's chance to survive tomorrow's fighting. By 10th of July, operational momentum had completely dissipated. Army Group Centre reported stalled advance across the northern sector. Army Group South maintained pressure toward Prokhorovka, but at unsustainable cost. Hitler demanded daily loss tables. Staff officers compiled statistics that told an increasingly grim story. Each day's gains cost more than the previous days, while Soviet resistance showed no signs of weakening. For the first time in the war, German offensive operations failed not from Soviet counterattack, but from self-inflicted exhaustion. The machines broke before the enemy did. Logistics could not sustain combat consumption. Maintenance capacity collapsed under the volume of disabled vehicles. Industrial war revealed its fundamental equation. Victory required not just tactical skill, but sustainable material advantage. Soviet intelligence monitored German difficulties with professional interest. Stavka prepared Operation Kutuzov, counter-offensive targeting the Oral salient north of Kursk, and Operation Rumyantsev, targeting Belgorod in the south. Soviet reserves remained largely intact. Tank production from Gorky, Chelyabinsk, and other factories exceeded 1,500 T-34s per month. The Red Army was prepared to absorb losses and continue operations. Germany was not. At OKH headquarters, staff officers reviewed projections and reached uncomfortable conclusions. The offensive could not achieve its objectives. The question was no longer whether to halt, but when, and whether to withdraw or defend captured ground. The answer came from Prokhorovka. On 12th of July 1943 at 08:30, Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army counterattacked the 2nd SS Panzer Corps near Prokhorovka. The engagement became the largest single-day tank battle recorded to that point in military history. Soviet intelligence had tracked German movements and identified the main axis of advance. Lieutenant General Pavel Rotmistrov's 5th Guards Tank Army, held in reserve until this moment, received orders to strike the advancing SS divisions. The attack aimed to blunt German momentum and impose unacceptable losses. 850 Soviet tanks, primarily T-34 7A6 models, with some KV-1 heavy tanks, advanced against 294 German tanks, including Tigers, Panthers, and Panzer IVs. Soviet doctrine emphasized closing range rapidly. T-34s carried 76.2 mm guns, effective against German armor at ranges below 800 meters, while German 88 mm guns remained lethal beyond 1,500 meters. Speed and mass substituted for individual superiority. Lieutenant Vasily Brukov commanded a T-34 with 181st Tank Brigade. His after-action report, preserved in military archives, described the engagement. We advanced at maximum speed, through dust and smoke. Visibility dropped to 50 meters. Navigation by compass. First Tiger appeared at 300 meters, too close for it to depress its gun. We fired 3 rounds into the track and lower hull. It stopped moving but continued firing. Second Tiger destroyed our left track at 200 meters. We kept firing until ammunition exhausted. The crew evacuated under smoke cover. 7 of us started the day. 4 returned. The battle lasted 5 hours. By 1330, approximately 400 Soviet and 80 German tanks were disabled or destroyed. The field resembled an industrial graveyard, burning hulks, ammunition explosions, thick smoke reducing visibility to nearly zero. Casualties on both sides were severe. Survivors described conditions as beyond previous experience. German operational reports emphasized tactical success, favorable loss ratios, ground held. Soviet reports emphasized strategic success. German advance halted, momentum broken. Both were correct. The engagement cost Germany tanks it could not replace and time it could not afford. The offensive's culminating point had been reached and passed. For historians analyzing the battle through archived documents, Prokhorovka represented industrial war's logical conclusion. Neither side won in traditional terms. The field was consumed. Both forces withdrew to reorganize, but Germany had attacked to break through and regain initiative. Halting without breakthrough meant operational failure, regardless of tactical performance. On 13th July, Soviet forces launched Operation Kutuzov against the Orel salient and Operation Rumyantsev toward Belgorod. The counter-offensives had been prepared for weeks, awaiting the moment when German strength exhausted itself against Soviet defenses. That moment had arrived. The Eastern Front would never again move eastward. Soviet Operation Kutuzov struck Army Group Center's positions north of Kursk on 13th July with overwhelming force. Western Front, Bryansk Front, and Central Front attacked simultaneously across a 300-kilometer arc. Artillery preparation exceeded anything previously recorded. Soviet fire plans allocated 300 rounds per gun. The bombardment lasted 90 minutes. German defensive positions, weakened by weeks of offensive operations, could not hold. Model's 9th Army, already depleted by Citadel's attrition, faced fresh Soviet units with full ammunition and fuel loads. By 15th July, Soviet forces had advanced 20 kilometers. Orel itself came under threat. Army Group Center reported 40,000 casualties between 13th and 17th July. Equipment losses reached catastrophic levels. 1,612 armored vehicles destroyed, abandoned, or disabled beyond recovery. Weather records note severe dust storms on 14-16 July, reducing artillery observation to 2 kilometers and complicating defensive operations further. General Walter Model, commanding 9th Army, ordered withdrawal despite Hitler's standing directive against retreat. The decision was documented in messages to Army Group Center headquarters. Continuation of defensive operations in current positions would result in complete destruction of available forces. Operational maps showed Soviet penetrations threatening encirclement. Logistics reports confirmed ammunition expenditure rates exceeded resupply capacity. The withdrawal from Orel proceeded under constant pressure. Soviet aviation maintained air superiority. Ground attack aircraft struck retreating columns. Artillery harassed road junctions. German rearguard units fought delaying actions to buy time for main force withdrawal. Casualties mounted daily. Transport difficulties multiplied. Soviet partisans interdicted rail lines. Bridges were destroyed to prevent pursuit. Supply dumps were evacuated or destroyed. Colonel Otto Kramer's engineering unit documented the withdrawal in daily reports. We buried our own fuel with the trains. Everything not mobile was demolished. The road resembled a 50-kilometer junkyard of abandoned equipment. Orel fell to Soviet forces on 5 August. The salient Germany had held for nearly 2 years vanished in 3 weeks. Railway repair units recorded 900 kilometers of track destroyed during the withdrawal. Prepositioned supply dumps containing months of accumulated material were lost. For Germany, Kursk's aftermath proved more costly than the battle itself. The offensive consumed strategic reserves without achieving objectives. The subsequent Soviet counteroffensives seized territory and inflicted losses Germany could not replace. Industrial production struggled to match losses. Trained crew replacements became increasingly scarce. Soviet losses were numerically higher but proportionally sustainable. Tank production exceeded consumption. Manpower reserves remained deep. Most critically, the Red Army had learned to defeat German offensive operations through systemic defensive preparation rather than counterattack alone. The tactical lessons of Kursk would shape Soviet operations through 1944-1945. The strategic balance had shifted permanently. The Eastern Front moved westward toward Berlin.